very good evening to you, dear viewers. You're watching Night TV International and Channel 2. This is Reem Tamer welcoming you into this English News Bulletin. We start right away with the headlines. Prime Minister Madbouli participates in AU Summit 38th session, holds a string of meetings. Israeli occupation releases over 300 Palestinian prisoners after receiving 3 more hostages. U.S. Vice President tells Ukraine's leader Zelensky U.S. wants lasting peace. Welcome back, the news in full. On behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli headed to Ethiopia to lead Egypt's delegation to the 38th ordinary session of the African Union Summit in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, which kicked off on Saturday. Details follow.
The 38th Ordinary Session of the African Union Summit kicked off Saturday in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. The summit is scheduled for February 15th and 16th and will be attended by many African leaders and heads of governments. Speaking at the opening ceremony, the outgoing chairman of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mohammed, said the U.S. proposal for what he called deportation of Palestinians from Gaza was, quote, the last straw. His remarks came days after U.S. President Donald Trump proposed moving more than 2 million people from Gaza to Jordan or Egypt to make room for real estate projects. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas voiced his complete rejection for any attempt to impose a new U.S.-backed controversial proposal to remove more than 2 million Palestinians from Gaza and settle them elsewhere in the region, warning that efforts to forcibly remove Palestinians from their land were delusional. Palestinian President weighed the stance of the African Union and its members to support the Palestinians in defending their land. The summit addresses the crisis in Sudan and Libya and probes ways of activating joint African mechanisms on the continental and international levels.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres stressed the necessity of implementing the ceasefire deal in Gaza Strip and releasing all prisoners and hostages. This came in his speech at the 38th Ordinary Session of the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. Guterres pointed that it is possible to reach peace in the Middle East through the two-state solution of Palestinian and Israeli states. In another context, he added that the African continent bears a lot due to the climate change and the developed countries should compensate them. Rafah border crossing. A Palestinian was killed by Israeli occupation forces in Nablus. Israeli occupation forces continued their aggression on Jenin and Tul Karm and its camp for the 20th day in a row, and on Nur al-Shams camp for the 7th day. Israeli jets hit eastern neighborhood of the city and around Tul Karm and Nur al-Shams camps that led to huge explosions without causing injuries. Occupation forces also briefed up with more developments through military barricades western Tul Karm and detained 2 Palestinians from a vehicle. They also detailed another young man in the same level. The occupation forces stormed the Beit Lahm city and down and broke into houses of the prisoners that are waited to be freed among the 6th group as part of the ceasefire deal in Gaza Strip. The outgoing deputy force commander of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon was injured on Friday after a convoy taking peacekeepers to Beirut airport was violently attacked. Jordan's Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi said in the Munich Security Conference that Arab countries are putting together a plan that would rebuild Gaza without displacing its people, guarantee security and governance, adding that his country could not take more Palestinians. Safadi warned that while the focus was on Gaza, there was a real danger of escalation in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Kuwaiti ambassador to the UN, Tariq al-Banai, expressed his country's full rejection to the displacement of the Palestinians. Arab countries were dismayed earlier this month after US President Donald Trump announced a plan to displace the Palestinians from Gaza and resettle most of them in Jordan and Egypt, an idea immediately rejected by Cairo and Amman and seen in most of the region as deeply destabilizing. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that China believes all stakeholders in the Russian-Ukraine conflict should participate in the peace talks, underscoring Europe's role in them after a flurry of US messaging on how to end the war. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Wang said China hopes that all parties and stakeholders directly involved participate in the peace talks in due course. China views all efforts dedicated to peace positively, including any consensus reached by the United States and Russia on peace talks. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance pledged that Washington sought to secure a lasting peace as he held a first meeting with Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss Donald Trump's push for a deal with Moscow. The talks in Munich were seen as a key moment for Kiev as it tries to keep Washington on its side after Trump stunned allies by announcing truce efforts with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. He said good conversations had been had with Zelensky about how they could reach that goal. Zelensky also held a good conversation, saying the encounter with Vance was our first meeting, not last, I'm sure.
And believes that we can.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Saturday said that Germany rejects outsiders intervening in their democracy, a day after U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, in a blistering speech, told Europe to open the door to far-right parties. Scholz, who faces elections on February 23rd, spoke in Munich, where Vance launched his broadside against Germany and the EU on immigration, free speech and other topics in a speech later praised by U.S. President Donald Trump. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Scholz pushed back against Vance's speech and also defended Germany's taboo against cooperating with extremist parties, often dubbed a firewall. Russia's defense ministry said on Saturday Russian troops have taken control of the settlement of Berezivka in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday that Ukraine would never accept any peace deals reached behind its back or without Kiev's involvement, in an implicit message to U.S. President Donald Trump as he strives to end the war with Russia. In a speech to the Munich Security Conference, Zelensky also called on Europe to create its own armed forces, urging the continent's leaders to decide their own future and saying Ukraine's armed forces alone were not enough for security. Zelensky said on Friday that a Russian drone had caused significant damage to the radiation containment shelter at the disused Chernobyl nuclear power plant overnight. Moving to the world of business and finance, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order creating a National Energy Dominance Council that will be tasked with helping meet the vast electric power needs to win the AI race with China. According to the White House, the council will coordinate energy policy across federal agencies and streamline permitting, production and distribution of various energy resources. The move aligns with Trump's campaign promise to boosting domestic oil and gas production and reversing any concerns from the Biden administration about carbon emissions or impacts on climate change. The aim is also to counter potential rising costs from Trump's trade wars that could see energy prices increase once energy imports or U.S. exports were slapped with tariffs. Russia's central bank sharply raised its inflation forecast for 2025, warning there was no sign rocketing price increases would go into reverse. The central bank held borrowing costs at a two-decade high of 21%, despite complaints from businesses and banks that the high key rate is hurting economic growth. The Russian central bank said in a statement that prices are now expected to go up between 7 to 8% this year, compared with an earlier forecast for 2025 2025 of between 4.5 to 5%. In a press conference after the rate announced, Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiullina said price pressures remain significant. She cautioned the faster price increases would persist despite a slight slowdown on inflation data at the start of the year. Moving to the exciting world of sports, as Real Madrid remain in the driving seat in the La Liga's title race, but after dropping points in consecutive weeks, Carlo Ancelotti's side have seen what seemed a comfortable lead suddenly vanish, leaving them with a battle to retain their crown. The leaders is playing now against Osasuna with 50 points, 1 point ahead of Atletico, with third placed Barcelona another point back and firmly in the title race. Real's 7-point cushion has disappeared and they have been left with little margin for error in a critical moment of the season. A brilliant goal by Brighton and Hove Albion's Koro Mitoma and the Yankuba Minte double gave the Seagulls a 3-0 Premier League home win over Chelsea overnight, a week after they knocked their London visitors out of the FA Cup, missing strikers Nicholas Jackson and Mark Guyu through injury. Chelsea dominated possessions but did not manage a single shot on target as they slumped to a defeat that leaves them fourth in the table on 43 points ahead of the weekend's fixtures. Brighton moved up to 8th on 37 points. This brings us to the weather forecast, as Egyptian Meteorological Authority said that moderate weather is expected to prevail tomorrow during daytime over Cairo, cold over the northern coast, warm in Upper Egypt and Sinai, during very cold at night all over the country. Here's a look at the expected highs and lows degrees in Cairo and other governorates. This brings us to the end of this English News Bulletin. Came to you out of Channel 2 and ITV International. That was Reem Tamer for you. And now it's time to say thank you for watching.